Besides the fully parameterized constructor, a class should contain a default constructor, which initializes fields to the default data for their types. A class can also contain partial constructors, which initialize some but not all of the fields of a class. Here's how to create these constructor types. So we'll begin by creating the default constructor. So underneath our fully parameterized constructor, we'll add that definition. So a default constructor has no arguments or no parameters, and it sets each field to its default value for that data type. For integer fields, that's going to be the value 0. So we'll set month to 0, day to 0, and year to 0. So now when we instantiate a date object using the default constructor, the month, day, and year will be 0. Let's create one more constructor. This time we'll only set 2 field values. Say the month and the year, leaving the day as 0. So for example, we'll work like this. So we have 2 parameters, m and y. Month is assigned m's value, day is assigned 0, and year is assigned y's value. So now we have 3 constructors which should cover all the different instantiation possibilities we can have with date class objects. So for example, and I won't display all of these, we can now write date, this date equals new date with no arguments. I'll put a little comment here that we'll call the default constructor. And then we can say date, some date equals new date (2013). So now we've created 2 new date objects, this date and some date. This date is instantiated with the default constructor, so month, day, and year are set to 0. Some date is instantiated with our third constructor, so that the month is set to 7, the day is set to 0, and the year is set to 2013. Let's take a look. We'll do each one of these. So we'll just change today to this date first. Let's fix that. All right, so let's run the program. Look at our output window. And so this date was built with the default constructor, so we see zeros for month, day, and year. Now let's change this date to some date. Run the program again. You see that we get 7/0/2013. We would probably want another method to display just the month and the year for that, and we'll talk about methods for displaying other than using the fields in the future. But for now, to summarize what we've shown here in this video is an example of a default constructor where each field is set to a default value. And then we created a second constructor, or a third constructor. Let me fix this. Where we set values for the month and the year and left the day to its default value 0.